Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Titanic Talks. It is Monday, April 12th, 2021. How are you? I hope you are well. I'm feeling energized and much better. I just received a clean bill of health. Test results came back negative. I do not have COVID-19. I'm excited about that, but also confused because I am still unable to taste a lot of food. It's slowly coming back. I thought maybe I had one of these variants that we hear about on the news, and maybe it's just some sort of sinus situation. I don't know, but it's an exciting week. This Friday we have a new song being released with a music video that I'm so excited about. Very, very, very pumped. And this one I've been really anxious to get out there into the world because it's a fun one, up tempo, which is typically not something that with my solo work I tend to do. I usually keep it around the 65 to 105 beats per minute area. That's just kind of naturally what happens when I pick up the guitar or sit down at the piano. And actually, I wrote this one relatively slow, I guess you would say. But over the course of the recording of this album, my production partner, Mr. Johnny Danger, John Goldsmith, has been very encouraging to bump up the tempos, if you know what I'm saying. And he's been right. It makes the songs a lot more fun to dance to, that's for sure. And so this song, which is called Senorita, will be coming out on Friday with a music video. I've been releasing promo videos on Instagram in an effort to raise awareness. And it's, I suppose, been somewhat controversial. I'm just taking the top, whatever the top story is, headline on CNN or one of these websites, and making it about my new song. And some people were upset about that because we're not supposed to have fun. We're supposed to be angry and sad all the time. So if you've been offended by my promotional effort for this music video, I do apologize. But please also know nothing matters. If it bleeds, it leads, you know, and I think be mad at the publications that choose to sell fear and then run advertisements for antidepressants. That's always a fun paradigm. It's been covered so many times by people much more interesting than me, but the older I get, I thought at some point I would hit a point of understanding of, oh, well, they're just selling fear, so the advertisers will have something to remedy that fear. And from a pretty young age, I suppose, I felt as though that was quite obvious. And then, with a healthy amount of psychedelic exploration, it becomes glaringly obvious. Psychedelics plus television is quite the experience. You really start to see through a lot of things and the motives behind the big, corporate media infrastructure. And so if you ever find yourself confused while watching any sort of programming from these major media conglomerates, if you find yourself feeling mentally fractured, just, it's, I think, a good idea to take a deep breath and realize what are the motives? Why are they making you feel that way? It really makes me enjoy this format so much. I mean, just all the loopholes and everything working within the traditional media system over the years. There's a serious amount of answering to executives, and it was always like when writing a screenplay, getting greenlit for a pilot for like a real show. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is so cool. I can just write a story and we can make it. And there's a whole courting process that goes on. And in my experience, it was with all of the networks. So you meet with, just all of the standard household names, production companies, and then, of course, the studios themselves, which now are pretty much all just owned by a small handful of they're under the umbrella of a small handful of very powerful decision makers, I guess you would say. So when things really started initially taking off in my career as a director, you start to get, hundreds of millions of people watching nonsense that you're putting on the internet in an effort to promote music. And then suddenly you get these executives who are reaching out to your team, which is how I used to operate, with a full team of people. It always makes me think of the MGMT song Congratulations, where he says, I've got someone to make reports and tell me how my money's spent. And that's accurate. Spent most of my adult life incredibly poor, and then suddenly lots of money. And that money then started to disappear, even though I wasn't buying things. What's this $40,000 missing for? Commissions? For what? And then around you, it's just everyone's, oh, this is just the way it is. Yeah, this is the way it is. Your money is our money now. Hollywood. But you get hip to it and you kind of, really it's just you either make the decision, well, I'm just going to keep paying all of this so I don't have to deal with it, or you put the big boy pants on or big girl pants on and just kind of go through things with a fine-tooth comb. But while, pardon me, I'm still recovering, I apologize. But while all of that was just kind of starting to happen, vortex of attention and money and a giant team of people, your people start to spread the word about you and what you're doing. And then suddenly it's these big networks or production companies or studios saying, hey, do you have a script? We'll give you a TV show. And I didn't. So I said, yes. And very quickly started writing television shows. Though I'd written a significant amount of movies and lots of movies. They want it typically to be about the thing that's popular. And so that's what I did. And I thought, hey, this is kind of cool, kind of interesting. These characters that started off as nonsense are being turned into an actual thing. And I thought that was really cool. And I can't believe these ideas that I've had for all these years are finally being made into something. And then you experience notes from executives who have never made anything before. And you realize, oh, you just... Well, no, that's mean. I had a mean thought. It's a nicer way of saying that. Well, the grass is always greener on the other side, and I would imagine if I was, at this point in my career, if I was in charge of greenlighting a program, a television show, for example, in this case, I would probably want to have some sort of influence. But it's weird to say at this point because I've actually made a significant amount of things that have garnered an amount of attention. I can't imagine what that must be like to have never really made anything before, but then telling someone how to make a hit show. So then suddenly you have, talking boxes of milk. And the justifications for those kinds of things, it's like, it kind of makes sense. I remember in that case, it was like, oh, well, the main character needs like a Toto. I'm like, all right, so, well, we don't really, in the canon of this world that at that point I had spent several years developing and introducing characters who had motives, and the characters are used as vehicles for telling the story, and you have to let the viewer kind of fill in the blanks, because that's, at least with the stuff that I make, I like the participant or the audience to be an active member of the storytelling. I always liked movies at the end where I sit there and I scratch my head and have to kind of figure out, like, well, what did that mean? I don't necessarily always feel like in a story I need to have my hand held the whole time, because that's not how life is. Just situations happen in life, whether it's in the news or in your day-to-day life, and we are active participants in that. And so when it comes to storytelling, it was cumbersome for me, I think, to be forced to hold the hand of the viewer. And really what I think ultimately that did is it just convoluted and made the story that I was trying to tell more confusing. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm getting several $100,000 to make each episode. And so it's like, all right, yeah, I guess I'll put a box of, not milk, but water in this shot. Because if that means I get to make a TV show, then I suppose that's what I have to do. But that gets a little, I think now with what I know, if I were in that situation, what I would do is I would have an additional support system of like a showrunner, as they say, someone who's had a healthy career of successes, and then have them, be the intermediate and say, hey, look, they want me to do this thing, and can you back me up on this? Because it's not helping the story. And that's probably how I would handle that. But I don't see myself getting another television show anytime soon. So I'm putting that attention towards the music, because, you go through life, and with the internet now, anyone can say anything they want about you. And it doesn't matter if it's remotely true, and it can completely dismantle 10 years of effort. That's certainly been the case for me. But, what can you do? You live and you learn, and realize that, people that you love will steal all of your money and publicly shame you. So that's fun. Very rarely do I see one of these situations where it completely makes sense. I think a lot of like the initial criminal behaviors that led to the what has kind of become, I suppose you would say, a culture of cancellations. It really did start off as like, oh, wow, these people are using a platform in a unique way to point out some really bad people who are breaking some laws. And I would just say, if you don't think that that's been heavily weaponized, I have a bridge I'd like to sell you. as well as some snake oil, and it works, trust me. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles, though. No more TV shows for me. But also, here's the world's smallest violin playing, just for me. But it's inspired some really. That kind of situation just made me think, okay, I just need to make better things and just do it myself with my friends. And I guess the first time I really went through like a public shaming, the result of that was an album that was well received and led to a Grammy nomination. So that's something. And, life goes on, and it just keeps on going on. And all the while, I, just think, well, I can always just pick up a guitar and write a song. Pardon me. And that was the impulse for this week's release, Senorita. It's a genre of music that I always have been in love with, but have been kind of fearful of, because it's weird, when you upload to any of these streaming services, Spotify, etc., you have to label it into genres. And I pretty much always use the blanket alternative, but then there's sub-genres. And this one felt appropriate as alternative disco, which I think makes sense. So the inspiration behind it musically, I briefly told the story on an earlier episode here, where I had listened to Frank Sinatra all day and picked up my acoustic guitar and immediately had a melody, which, listening back, I don't think sounds at all like something that Sinatra would have sang. But I think if you spend a healthy amount of time, all day listening to just these classic songs that you've heard a million times, it's almost like this musical soup goes on in the head. And I think that influenced me to really focus on a memorable melody. And I knew also I wanted to, in listening to a lot of songs that Max Martin has written and produced, his heavy usage of harmonic minor, if you're into music, it has like a spicy characteristic. Does that make sense? If you're a musician, does that make sense? Harmonic minor. Or if you're watching this, maybe open up another tab and just type into YouTube harmonic minor explained, or music theory harmonic minor. That was the impulse of this new song. And I realized that a lot of songs that I love utilize the tenets of harmonic minor. And I thought, because the melody I was kind of humming to myself, it reminded me of harmonic minor, and I was like, oh, okay, let's take a look at it, and kind of played around, and like, oh, okay, yeah. And there's just throughout life as a songwriter, I just always kind of gravitated towards things that are more major sounding, because to me, if something's in a major key, it has like a triumphant and official feeling to it, whereas the minors can be a bit darker and a little sadder. And then you get into kind of the specifics within those modes, and I had never really explored that realm until this song, and I think it is memorable. And so the lyrics are I love the lyrics in it. In the music video, the lyrics appear on the screen, as I have done quite often in my music videos, because sometimes I feel as though seeing the actual lyric on the screen can be helpful. Sometimes you don't want that there. In this case, I think it was a good move, karaoke style. So after you learn the song, you can go back and sing along to it if you wish. And there's I invested in a disco ball and some vintage filters for the camera lens, and I'm just very excited with how it happened. And then musically, it just has elements of everything I love. Over the years, while playing bass live, it's really influenced me too. Typically, I'll start with a song, just a melody and chords usually on an acoustic guitar, and then I'll just record myself singing gibberish and see what comes out of that. There's two schools of thought there, where you have the words written and you find a way to fit the melody or the words into your melody, or the way I do it, which is I let what sounds natural come out, and then I'll fit my words to fit those sounds. People will debate that philosophy until the end of time, but that's how I do it. So I had some sounds, two melodies that I liked a lot, and for some reason it sounded like Senorita should be a starting point, and it felt appropriate because the music to me sounded quite sexy. And I thought, well, I could write a song about my Mexican girlfriend. And in an effort to impress her family, I wrote some in Spanish. So there's a lyric in Spanish, which I've been trying to learn more. I haven't taken formal lessons yet, as I do with Japanese, but I'm finding even just in picking up the basics of Spanish. It is way easier than Japanese. The sentence structure is at least closer to English, which is my native tongue. And I'm enjoying that. And there's a lot of Spanish-speaking folk here in Texas, so implementing that is quite easy. Because the only way to really learn a language is to submerge yourself into it. In learning Japanese, it's one thing to take lessons every week. But wow, once you're over there and day to day, it's like riding a bike. You could read all the materials and watch all the YouTube videos. This is how you ride a bike. But then gravity gets involved and you got to fall off the bike. And that's always the analogy I kind of use for learning a second language, or now a third language. Gravity in that case is implementation, real world. And I remember once, maybe it was the second or third time I had visited Japan, and someone told me, maybe I told this story already, but someone told me that I speak a native speaker of the Japanese language. He told me that I speak as if I'm at a wedding, and we laughed. Because of the formal way that I was learning it. I didn't realize how much slang is involved in every language. And so I know a couple people who are masterful, 4 or 5 different languages. And they told me, yeah, you gotta just learn how to communicate in slang first, because you'll be able to get by. And I think that's probably he's a tour manager in Europe. And so I think he had a different approach. He wasn't necessarily learning languages just for fun. He had to know how to communicate to get himself and whatever bands he was tour managing out of sticky situations, which are abundant. Oh, the amount of times overseas just almost getting into a fight. It's weird. Never been a fighter, but yeah, I remember once in Germany, we had a real sticky situation once at a hotel bar of all places. And just a bunch of these drunk guys were extraordinarily disrespectful to a friend of ours who at the time was beginning her transition male to female. And these jerks, that'll be the nicest way of saying it, just wouldn't let it go. And it's weird. I don't know if it's like I don't know what it is, but we all knew what was going on very quickly. It was like only us and these idiots at the bar. And, she could my friend can handle her own, but me and the other guys weren't having it. So we almost got into a bar fight. Led by my friend who I think he speaks 5 languages, and I don't know if he was fluent in German, but I knew he spoke enough to kind of communicate. And those are weird, those situations, you know. It's always weird being around that sort of animosity. But in a weird way, that's like one of the things that I've been missing with not being able to travel around and get into those weird, potentially dangerous situations, because you learn so much from those. There's so much life to be learned in a matter of seconds. Being in another country and, you know, like that impulse of like something as simple as just like standing up for your friend and being like, oh, by doing this might not end well for me. And then, 10 minutes later, you're laughing about it and kind of being like, wow, did that really happen? It's weird. It's just like there's been such a lack of those remarkable, bizarre situations. Just being on the road in general, it's always something. It's addictive. Because being go, I think there's like a numbing quality maybe. And you can kind of just, the real world ceases to exist, or at least for me it did. And I think I got used to that. So this past year, snapping back to reality has been, I think a lot of lessons have been learned. It makes me wonder, like, with, I was watching this documentary about the Eagles. I've really been listening to them quite a bit. And man, I didn't realize how hard they partied. Wow, they went for it. I guess, the 1970s, that was just a different time. I mean, we went wild too, don't get me wrong, but it seems like they were like on a different level. And it just had me wondering, like, how are people, I'm in my 30s and I feel like a dinosaur, but people in their like late 60s, 70s, especially who have lived a similar lifestyle, maybe being on the road, playing music, how are they handling this closed down world? And I understand, things are opening up here and there. And being in Texas, we're open 100% down here. But from my perspective, at least, it's like, like, yeah, I used to just carry my passport around just in case I had to fly to Europe, drop of a dime, or wanted to, like, gotta go. That was kind of the impulse when life got too real, or I'd get like stressed out from, work. Spend, a couple of weeks on a sound stage, which is another form of life not being real. Just spending 12 hours every day in synthetic light with sets, flats, and looking at life through a camera lens. So that was, that was being home. And then it was an equal and opposite extreme on the road. So you can imagine pretty much a year of like no travel, and the little travel that I've had to do for work, wildly different. There's this kind of just like impending doom feeling that just seems to be surrounding everything. And maybe I think a significant amount of that is probably my own doing. Maybe paying attention to the pessimistic aspects of this new world. But I don't know. The only way I've really found to remedy that is to not be inside as much as possible. And this heat wave, which I'm sure will probably last until Christmas, here in Texas at least, it's been really good. Just kind of being able to go outside and soak up that sun. Soak up the sun. Sheryl Crow really nailed it on that song. I want to soak up the sun. Sometimes, someone will really nail it with the chords and the melody and just saying the right thing at the right time, the right way. I think she nailed it on that one. I'm gonna tell him now. I recently discovered, though, I was a little disappointed. I didn't know that All I Want to Do by her is actually written by, it was a poem. And apparently this was well known. But I did not know that, because as I go through and listen to the songs over the years that I enjoy, I like to go and read the credits and see who wrote them. Because now that I've kind of been through that system, and realize like, oh my God, like, especially in like pop music, like really no one writes their own songs. For the for the most part, it's very rare. And but then I had maybe a couple months ago, I had a bit of a Sheryl Crow moment, and I remember just reading the lyrics to "All I Want to Do." Is that the actual title of the song? Feels like that'd be something in the 90s. All I want to do, parentheses, is have some fun. But it was just word for word for the most part, just taken from some other poet. And it's weird. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was kind of like, kind of like that thing, finding out Santa Claus isn't real. Because then my perspective of it went from like, oh wow, like this girl sounds like she lives a pretty interesting life. And now when I hear it, it's like, oh, she just read a poem. Who's the person who wrote the poem? Because they seem to have lived an interesting life. Really, that's why, the Bob Dylans of the world, it's just kind of like, how do you exist? That makes no sense whatsoever to me. The perspective. And who's going to be the next? But you only really seem to get a handful of those. The David Bowies, Bob Dylan. When's the last time you listened to Hunky Dory? Like, it really doesn't make any sense to me how someone could write those songs. I was probably maybe 21 or 22 when I really first started listening to Bowie. And it was always kind of, I had heard, the hits. But a friend of mine turned me on to Low. And from there, it was just game over. But I was always kind of a Hunky Dory fan. I leaned towards that one. It's like with the Beach Boys, it's like, sorry, I just, Pet Sounds. Though I would argue today, I just listened to the whole album yesterday. It seems as though in artist careers, there's just these like moments where everything makes sense and tends to be right before it's like superstardom. Rubber Soul, Beatles. Maybe their best album? I understand that's blasphemous to say, but those would be as far as Beach Boys, Beatles, Bowie, those are my three most listened to. Revolver might be neck and neck, but probably Rubber Soul. When you can sing every harmony of a whole album, That's how you know you've heard that album. You've heard that one quite a few times. But those albums I can't get enough of. But I'm the type, I try to listen to, or at least keep giving newer music a shot. But I'm one of those people. I'd rather listen to an album I love 10 more times. And that's the great thing about great albums is every time you hear it, you hear something new. Usually it's like if I learned like a new chord, or if I'm thinking about progressions and arrangements. That was, yesterday for me. I've heard Today by the Beach Boys realistically all the way through probably 600 times, 700 realistically. And there was a time where that was all I listened to was that album, probably for like 3 months, just every day. But I'm still hearing things I haven't noticed before, and that's the genius of Brian Wilson. Usually it's like with harmony stuff. I'll notice one of the voices is just singing one note while all the other notes are going all over the place. The other voices, I'm like, oh wow, I need to do that more. It holds things together. That's what I was thinking yesterday. And then also, for being, I guess the same could be said about Pet Sounds, but for being what I would consider, two of the greatest, I would call them pop albums ever made. The chord progressions are just so out of this world, even the simple ones. And it had me thinking while I was driving and listening to it, like, there's only so many chords, but the combinations of those chords, and then, the melody that glues it all together. Seemingly infinite. And for a long time with my, it's funny, like doing the videos the past couple of weeks about Thick Jello and I Have Teeth. It's funny to look back at those now. I'm like, oh, I only used like a handful of progressions. And now with this was like a subconscious thing. I didn't even notice that I was doing it, but I believe every song on the album is a new chord progression. Yeah. Which is kind of tricky, especially when the songs are simple. Because one of the tenets of making this album is I wanted to just simplify. Because, it was a couple years of just doing the most extreme, confusing, really, the complete opposite from to the point where I consider it like comedic. And a lot of, atonal stuff. I wasn't even, I guess up until I stopped working on that project. I was just thinking about sounds, not songs. When it came to the lyrics, I would always make sure they were cohesive and coming from an honest place. But, when you're writing songs about eating children and drinking their blood in one song at least, and then the next one's like a literally about like a letter to Billie Eilish. True. But that's just, So now I guess being free of the confusion, because if there's like expectations, I would imagine that can probably get to one's head as an artist if, to become known as something, as one thing. The expectation of having to follow that up. That's almost, for me, doing my own thing. It's always been very freeing that there really is no expectation. But I think because from the get-go, I kind of established that for myself as just like, I'm just doing what I do here. This is what I'm into right now, and this is the kind of music I'm making. I think maybe that's a result of really never, with my solo work, never having to answer to anyone. Because there is a degree of that, with working with labels and all that. In my experience, nowhere near as bad as dealing with like the television network situation. But also the stakes are much lower, budgets for albums nowadays are relatively non-existent. And it just the barrier to entry of making a television show. I mean, it's just more expensive to do. At least the type of show that I was making. But that's kind of what's cool about music these days. Everyone has the ability to make an album. If you have a computer, well, you could do it on your phone now. It's like if you have an idea for a song, something interesting to say with a good beat, or if you come up with a beautiful melody and a couple of chords and the lyrics that fit it, I mean, in theory, anyone can do it. I'd like to hear if anyone watching this makes music. I'd like to hear the kind of music y'all are making. That could be fun to listen to. I've seen in a lot of the comments, people have mentioned that they make music as well. So yeah, send it to me. I'd like to hear it. Oh boy, oh boy. All right, well, it's a busy week this week, and this one, see, we just boom, right straight through, no edits, no cuts. I have a lot to do, so I'm gonna get to work. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you're doing very well. Remember to drink lots of water and stay hydrated. I am just so happy to be feeling better. It was rough. It was like almost 2 weeks of just like feeling off. But here we are, back in business. Listen to Hunky Dory, especially if you've never heard it. David Bowie. Oh, man. Good stuff. And yeah, if you're not subscribed to this channel, I would appreciate that very much. But chances are you already are. But please do consider becoming a member by hitting that join button. And we've got a whole catalog of additional content now, with new ones every Friday. Can you believe it? I can't. It's weird to think that I went, my entire career without ever talking. And now there's probably 15 hours of me talking on the internet now. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, if you want to become a member, click join, and new videos every Friday. So members, we'll see you Friday. Otherwise, we'll see you next Monday. Much love. Bye-bye.